The Earth's biorhythms are only draw in terms of how they peak out. They produce literally a spike. 12 August, 12 August, 12 August, in 20-year intervals of concern to us, and also 2003. Here sat the Eldridge until it moved. And here sat the Phoenix Project. It did not move. It was rather well anchored. And in the middle in '63, there's essentially nothing. There's another peculiar thing happens. As you start this business of going through time, let's mark this as 43, let's mark this as 63, and let's mark this as 83. You are looking at it on sidewise again. You're actually a full circle for the 40 years. It takes 40 years to go the full circle of 20 years where you have a synchronization point, you're 180 out of phase, which can be represented as a sine wave, like so, with a crossover point in 63. But this is a flat representation. This doesn't mean it's reversing polarity per se, but it does. The problem was created, and the problem was created is this. Time also has waves. Like a standing wave in electromagnetic theory on an RF transmission line, if you don't damp it properly and its characteristic impedance, let us show theoretically a nice little line where we have RF on it, properly terminated, it's even of constant voltage, and as we say, the standing wave ratio is 1. That means you got perfect transmission and there are no waves coming back at you. If this thing is not properly terminated out here in the characteristic impedance of the source and the transmission line, whatever you're using, you start to get funny little things. These things start to build up, and you start to come down here to a lower level, and these start to build up, and you start going to a lower level. You build up standing waves, and these things go up and they come back. And when it gets bad enough, you have enormous voltage levels. And theoretically, they can go unterminated out at this end. Theoretically, can go to infinity. They don't, for practical reasons. But you get the same problem in time.
10 minutes.
Got it. And this means something very extraordinary. If you have standing waves in time, you will find that this time factor starts doing this. The standing waves produce a phenomena of standing waves which go back and forth, and if you start whipping through the 63 point, the crossover point, and create a reverse time wave, you then have, in the reality in which you're dealing, the artificial reality as well as coupled to both ends, and most particularly in the 83 end where the Phoenix Project is, you can generate, and they were in the process of generating, a reverse time wave. What happens if you have a forward and reverse time wave hitting the physical Earth at the same time? As I found out very recently, Dr. Van Neumann knew what the problem was and knew what could result. And they had to set up a special team prior to the critical date of 12 August 83 to handle the problem. Had they not found the correct team of scientists, there were 4 involved: Dr. Van Neumann, a second man whom I know but I will not give the name of because he doesn't want to give him, and 2 scientists from the future. Yes, I did say the future, because with Montauk they could go into the future or the past. They got a team together. They moved hardware to 1963 to provide damping, because they knew that if this thing was not damped sufficiently, at least to a critical level, to prevent the reverse time wave from hitting, do you have any idea what would have happened? They would have torn the entire tectonic plate structure of the North American continent apart, ripped off the entire top level of the North American continent, probably to the Rocky Mountains, to a depth of 500 to 700 feet, the ocean would have roared in and we would have been back in the Stone Age instantly. That is what they faced, and that is what they had to prevent. And since I'm here talking to you today, they prevented it. Or we wouldn't be here, any of us. That was the problem they faced, and that is what they did correct. There was a code name for that project. The code name was Atlanticus Not Revisited. Rather interesting parallel. I'm sure some of you know the stories of Atlantis. They did successfully solve this, and of course the time rift was created without the additional problems. The aliens had what they wanted, including a stable Earth, because I'm quite sure they didn't want half of the planet ripped apart. Otherwise, what was their purpose in coming here? They wanted a viable planet with a society and civilization intact, which it still is. And that problem had to be solved and was solved. There are many aspects of this, and I'm not going to even attempt to go into math on this. In fact, I don't remember most of it. I think Preston could if he wanted to explain it mathematically. But this problem was solved. The whole thing was damped down, and these people disbanded. This was not a government project, believe it or not. It was privately done. It was privately run, and the people who were involved were non-governmental, and I question if the government even knew what was going on in that respect until perhaps when it was all over, or perhaps till now. That was solved, and consequently it went on, and the physical aspects of our reality remained intact. But here you had that problem. How did you get this whole thing to settle up and line up, and how did you get the communication? Without the extraterrestrials and without Dr. Costain, they wouldn't have been able to put the pieces together in that fashion, because the test on the 20th or 22nd of July of '43 with the Eldridge produced no oddball effects other than the fact they had serious electromagnetic exposure problems to the crew. The ship didn't disappear and nothing happened to it. When it came back on the 12th of August, 4 hours later approximately, the ship had some physical damage, and of course the people buried in the decks and the bulkheads, they had a very, very serious problem they faced. That problem, in terms of the personnel, has been solved since. I do not know the exact technology in which they finally did solve it, but Van Neumann was requested in 1947 to go back and look at the problem and see if they could salvage anything. He did. He solved the problem. First, he had to invent a computer. The modern electronic computer is the brainchild of Dr. John Van Neumann. The Institute of Advanced Study, the first one built, perfected is perhaps not the word, but functional, in 1952, and a complete system involving a computer shipped to the Navy in '53 with another test on another ship. And I was not there because the Navy had decided it was time for me to disappear. And that test was very successful in '53, and they renamed the project, no longer Project Rainbow, but Project Phoenix. It was a big umbrella that covered many, many projects. Over many years, many generations of hardware, they did make it very practical. It is now on the B-1 and the B-2 bombers. It's on all the large carriers. The B-2 bomber, of course, being the stealth. And that system is totally functional without any apparent hazardous side effects. I was removed from the Navy in 1947. I knew too much, was learning too much from digging in the vaults of Los Alamos, and somebody with the communication up and down the line decided I had to go. But part of this problem and the damping out here from 43 to 83, as a Levinson equation state, there were standing wave ripples which go on for another 20 years out to 2003. This part had to be damped. We weren't concerned about the back end. So Duncan and I were specially set up and processed, by whom I do not know and how I don't know, but we've been the stabilizing factors on this whole Levinson matrix, if you will, the time stability factor, which has kept everything stable, and after 2003 I guess we're not required anymore. Who knows what will happen to us by then. That was also part of the project called Atlanticus Not Revisited. I do not know what was done, but I do know it was accomplished. So I think we've fairly well covered this, and in a brief nutshell, The problems that were generated by those two projects were solved. Of course, Phoenix went down on the night of 12 August 83 from sabotage, and it's been out of operation ever since, though there is a new Phoenix at a different location, now essentially operational. The aliens knew what they wanted, they got what they wanted, and today we have a problem with the aliens that we'll not go into. I think that pretty well winds it up, other than to say my experiences have been put into a book entitled The Philadelphia Experiment and Other UFO Conspiracies. I do have a few copies upstairs on the table where Preston Nichols is located, and I also have a few left, I believe, in the bookstore, and they are for sale. If you have any other questions, I think I have about 2 minutes. I'll attempt to answer any questions at this point, and then I can answer questions later.
A question?
Yeah, gentleman, a lady back there with glasses.
If they have this advanced technology, what do they need us for?
They need us for two things. In fact, three perhaps, but number one, in terms of the technology, they need our capability to manufacture hardware to their specifications, which we are now capable of doing. And so far as the Orions are concerned, they're engaged in an advanced base operation in a general warfare. And there is warfare going on out in space now. We hope it doesn't come to the surface of Earth. The second part of this is, in terms of the Greys, they need us as warm bodies for genetic experimentation to develop a new race. And involving this is also the CIA and our government in secrets, very great secrecy. They are doing extreme genetic engineering and have developed a lot of new things, including a totally new class of implants, which are now biological, not hard chips. And this is only one tip